How's it going, everyone? Cuppa Anime Joe here. In the next installment of a series I want to try calling Rant Records. Maybe a series isn't the best way of putting it. It's really just going to be what I label a lot of the discussion videos as. So, here in the beginning, as I try to figure out what exactly I want to do with the channel, I'm going to have the chapter reviews, and then I'm also going to have the discussions. And I think the discussions are going to be called Rant Records, where yours truly here rants on the internet, or at least discusses on the internet about all things One Piece. But again, here in the beginning, I think I'm going to focus the discussions more on the chapters themselves until I start getting some more ideas on what might be fun to talk about. And so this one is going to be for chapter 1111. Probably the last time in all of One Piece where we are going to get a chapter number where all the numbers are the same in a row. So we had 11, things like 222, 333. Now we have 1111, 1111. I have a sneaking suspicion we're not going to reach 2222. That'd be really long. That's another 1,000 chapters. So the first thing that came to my mind when I was reading this chapter is the Frontier Dome a fully fledged force field? Because in the beginning, I thought it was more of like a laser defense grid, where, you pass through a certain area in space, and then you trigger the lasers, and they shoot you in the face. But in this chapter, with Mars powering through it, it almost kind of seems more like it's an actual force field, like a dome. I mean, it is called the Frontier Dome, so it wouldn't be surprising to me if it's a fully fledged force field. But either way, Mars crashed right through it. I personally think he just did it in one shot. Maybe he had to hit it a few times and he was just regenerating. But with as powerful as the Gorosei seem to be, and the fact that, Luffy, although Luffy's a Yonko, he's powerful too, but Luffy was able to make it through it. Bonnie got kicked through it and was okay. She was hurt. She was definitely injured, but it didn't kill her. So I like to think a Gorosei like Mars could just muscle his way right through maybe in one shot. And upon arrival, I actually think it's pretty major that Jinbei comments on how foreboding Mars's haki is. Because something I didn't initially think about, and I've heard mentioned elsewhere too, is that Jinbei is a character who has spent a lot of time around powerful people, fighting against them, working under them, right? He was affiliated with Whitebeard, he was affiliated with Big Mom, he's a warlord, so he's familiar with high-tier characters, and he's familiar with powerful haki, specifically powerful Conqueror's haki. So I think it's telling that Jinbei is reacting in this way to Mars in his level of power. And I also think that with the streaks of black lightning being shown, there seems to be a little one behind Jinbei, and there seems to be black lightning when Mars is hitting the Frontier Dome. I think that he is using Conqueror's haki, and that honestly probably all the Gorosei have Conqueror's haki. And so, while the current plan seems to be to escape, I also kind of like to think that maybe there's a chance where there's a slight shift in dynamic. And even though I don't think the broadcast is coming from Egghead, or I don't think the entirety of the broadcast is coming from Egghead, I would still like to see the crew and company, the Straw Hats and the Giants, contest the Gorosei a little bit, at least to defend against the message. This might be kind of tough, because Mars is already in the lab confronting York, and Jinbei and Zoro are already escaping. So maybe there won't be an encounter between Jinbei, Zoro, and Mars, but I do think it would be fun to watch, at least see two of the strongest characters in the Straw Hats fighting one of the Gorosei, similar to how Luffy and the Giants are fighting the Gorosei. Do I think they could defeat Mars? No. In fact, I don't think we're going to defeat any of the Gorosei here. I at one point thought that maybe we'd be defeating Saturn, but I don't think that's going to happen either. I think that the mission isn't to defeat any of the Gorosei. They're probably not going down this arc. We may learn a way of damaging them. I'll touch on that later. But also, I think that at least a stalling match would be fun to see, right? Like, we're seeing the Giants contest them. We've seen Luffy contest them. Let's see Zoro, Sanji, and Jinbei contest them too. In terms of the Gorosei and their strength, I have a couple different ideas as to who the strongest of the Gorosei are. My current favorite one, and the one I'm leaning toward, is that Workuri is the strongest, because it kind of goes in the order of planets in that way, right? In the solar system, the closest planet to the sun is Mercury, and that is the planet that Workuri is embodying, basically. So that would make him the strongest. It would put Venus Juro as number 2, and I think Zoro always fights the number 2s in the groups, right? So maybe it does make sense that Venus Juro, Ethan, is the second strongest. One, because Venus is the second planet from the sun in the solar system. And 2, because I really do believe sometime in the future, even if it's not this arc, he is going to be Zoro's opponent. And then we'll skip Earth. We would have Mars next. So Marcus would be 3. And then we have Jupiter after that. So Shepard, Jupiter would be 4. And then I also think that Saturn is the weakest of the Gorosei. And so in this lineup, it would land on Saturn at the end, making him the weakest of the group. And in terms of the actual power standing of the Gorosei, we just haven't seen enough of them. I think it's too soon to really try and pin where they're at. But if I was to make a guess, I would put them somewhere above Admirals and maybe below Yonko or around Yonko in that tier. Of course, not all Yonko are created equal. Gags aside, I think the Gorosei would run over Buggy. But I think that they would probably struggle the most against someone like Shanks. Shanks maybe even has stronger hockey than what we've seen the Gorosei do, or at least comparable. So I'm right now, because Yonko is the power ceiling we're familiar with, I'm going to place them closer to that end than to, say, Admirals, which, for better or for worse, I do believe that Yonko are more powerful than Admirals. And I gotta say, I don't think I'll ever get tired of Gear 5th. Gear 5th is so fun to watch. In the review, I did not even notice that Workuri's cry caused Luffy's scars to even fly off. So he lost his face scar and his chest scar. That was part of the things that flew off him. And when he was like, whew, that's close, he was holding his face scar. Like, oh yeah, let me just patch that back on. Right? That's crazy. That just honestly makes me wonder what even the limit of Gear 5th is, and just what kind of crazy shenanigans will we be seeing from it in the future. And I didn't think about this in the review either, probably just because Gear 5 is Gear 5. But Luffy made that bat real quick, like cartoon logic speed. And when he painted it black, I think that was a visual representation of him slapping some armament hockey on there. Because otherwise, the tree wouldn't have been strong enough to reflect the attack. But, at least, well, maybe a Gear 5th imbued tree bat would be. But it's just fun to think of the hockey, the black paint coating, as like Luffy visibly putting the hockey coating on instead of just using the standard armament visualization. And yeah, this is just because it was strong enough to reflect Saturn's attack quite easily. And we'll talk about the Giants a bit too. I like their showing in terms of power. I just think, like, regardless of their pre-time skip showings and the fact that they were in some ways taken out by Mr. 3 on Little Garden, although it's been a long time since I read it, so, you know, maybe, I mean, Mr. 3 definitely used some underhanded tactics. But I think that was just mostly for drama in the arc. And I really think that what we're seeing now is more fitting of the level of power one would expect to see from a giant of Elbaf. Right? Like, Elbaf has been hyped up so much. Even Big Mom believed that if the giants were on her side, she would be able to defeat any of the other Yonko. I'm fairly certain that Elbaf is both not affiliated with the world government and not an island they can touch anyway, even without Shanks. Like, I think it's probably under Shanks' territory. But even without that, I don't see the government just easily going and messing with the giants. So, like the Gorosei, I don't know yet how to scale them, but Dory and Bragi together are faring pretty well against Warcury and Saturn and Jupiter. So that definitely speaks volumes. Like, they're up there in the power tier. Maybe neither of them are quite Yonko level, but together they might be comparable. I don't know. We haven't seen enough of the giants yet to really tell. But either way, I like the portrayal they're being given. And yeah, I just think it's fitting for Elbafian giants. And we got the good old Vice Admirals. I really think that if Sanji were to come in, he would wash these VAs. At this point, I think that the stronger members of the Straw Hats are beyond what your typical Vice Admiral is going to represent in terms of power. We'll take Garp out of this because Garp is the anomaly. He might as well be Admiral tier or even higher, at least in his prime. But, I think these Vice Admirals could give a good opportunity for some of the weaker members of the Straw Hats to shine. Like maybe Frankie and Bonnie take them on. Or if the group above joins in, we could have Nami and Usopp join in and Brook join in. So I think it might be fun to see some of the lower power level Straw Hats actually dealing with these Vice Admirals as a show of how far they've come. And then, Venus, we don't see him this chapter, but he is still just blitzing the island and ransacking the Pacifista. So I think there's a good chance Venus runs into this group below, and we know who the other person down here is. That's right, it's Sanji. Now, we don't know when Luffy's group's going to catch up. We don't know when Zoro and Jinbei are going to catch up. We get to see Sanji and perhaps a couple of the giants that are with that group take on Venus and hold him back. And then we can see some of the other Straw Hats and possibly Bonnie taking on these Vice Admirals and holding them back, or possibly even defeating them. I could totally see more Vice Admirals getting defeated in this arc. And I'm just going to touch on this briefly. Just like I said in the chapter, Kizaru's done. I'm not going to downplay the amount of damage he took from Luffy. Like, our boy's a Yonko at this point. He's definitely at a level of power where he's taken admirals. But I really think what defeated Kizaru was his decision to kill Vegapunk. So I kind of thought maybe there was a chance he'd get up and encounter Sanji and take Vegapunk. Or maybe there's even a chance of him still doing something this arc. But I'm really starting to think that, Kizaru's got to live with his mistakes this time. And if he is going to get character development out of it, it's either going to be in a future arc, or maybe he does something big at the end of Egghead. Like, the combination of what he's seen the Gorosei as, what they made him do to his friend, and possibly hearing Vegapunk's message all together could maybe spur him into some other form of action. And also just seeing Luffy fight for the people that he, as I think, also wants to be fighting for, regardless of if he can bring himself to do it or not. And we have Mr. Ancient Iron Giant up and walking. Huge. We don't know how much juice he's going to get. It really seems like he's powered off of Gear 5th, so how much longer can he run on his own after Luffy goes out of Gear 5th or leaves? We don't know. But I really like to think that this giant is going to be the catalyst that allows escape to be possible at the end. Whether we escape right away, or whether we hold off the Gorosei for Vegapunk's message to go through. I think what's now giving the whole group a chance to escape, all the Straw Hats, which we knew they're going to get away, but even also the Giants, Oimo and Kashi, which we haven't seen in a few chapters, and Dorian Brogy. I think there's a chance for all of them to get away because this Giant's here. While I'm not sure how much it's going to be able to do because of its condition, I'd like to think that it can at least hold back the Gorosei and the remainder of the government that's fighting. And I even also think there's a chance that it can give us a glimpse or help us glean some information, perhaps, on how to actually harm the Gorosei. Because if anything is going to have a means or knowing how to do that, it's going to be technology from the Void Century. Maybe even the era that they come from. And I find it interesting that the Iron Giant apologizes to Joy Boy. Like, that's the first thing. He's saying, sorry, Joy Boy. Zunisha also said the same thing. What did these guys do? Did they, like, somehow betray Joy Boy? Maybe they just failed him. Maybe they all failed in their mission, and they're just apologizing for that. You know, we know Zunisha was punished for something, but we don't know what it is. And we even know that Joy Boy himself issued an apology of his own to the Mermaid Princess of his era. So, I'm just curious. It's interesting to see how much apologizing is going on from these Void Century beings. And it really makes me wonder and excited for the future when we get more of a lore dump about the Void Century. I don't think that's going to come from Vegapunk's message. I think that's going to be more focused on the current state of the world and just how tyrannical the world government is. Whether, you know, even though it's hidden from plain sight. I really think the big Void Century reveals aren't going to come until Robin reads the poneglyphs that they're on. So, that's it for today. That's the discussion for this chapter. If you like what I've said here, please give the video a like and give me a follow. If you have any comments of your own, drop them below. I'd love to hear it. We can chat a little bit more there. And because we're on a 3-week break, so that Oda can rest and probably get his health checked out and just mourn the loss of his friend, I am going to try to come up with ideas of other things to talk about in the coming weeks. But if not, you can check out my main channel. There's a link in my profile. Or I'll see you guys once I return from the break. So we'll see. Thank you, and have an excellent rest of your day.